What's up nerds, my name is Abdul Nafe and welcome back to a brand new tutorial. And in this one, we're going to be making this amazing render inside of Unreal Engine 5. Now, if you're new to Unreal Engine 5 and you want to take your car rendering game to the next level, then this tutorial is going to be perfect for you. Now, I do want to mention one thing here, which is that this render is basically a part of my full Unreal Engine 5 car rendering course. So if you want to learn how to make other car renders as well, then you can feel free to check out my course on Gumroad. I think that course is perfect if you're new to Unreal Engine 5 and you want to take your car rendering game to the next level. But yeah, without any further ado, let's start. Alright, so next up we're going to be making this scene right here. And so I think this is basically a forest with some trees and grass, and it's pretty simple to make. So yeah, let's begin with Unreal Engine. So I'm just going to open my Unreal Engine again, and you're going to see that we are inside the previous project which we just did, the garage project. And so I'm just going to be copying the car from here so that we don't have to sort of texture it again and just import everything again. Obviously, if you want to use a different car, then you can just choose a different car and use the same process which I previously showed you to import another car. So I'm just going to be right-clicking this McLaren folder, select all descendants, and I'm just going to press Ctrl C on my keyboard. And now I can just go to File, New Level, and then I can just create a new empty level. With this, I'm just going to press Ctrl S so that I can save it. I'm just going to call it Forest Car SS. And now I'm just going to be going to landscape mode. Let's create a landscape real quick. Create. We're not going to be sculpting or anything like that. And I'm just going to be pressing Ctrl V so that we get the car here. And you're going to see that the car is perfectly aligned with the floor and it's perfect. Right, so next up, we're going to be setting up the basic lighting setup. And the way we do that is by going to Window, Environment Light Mixer, create Skylight, Atmospheric Light, Sky Atmosphere, Volumetric Cloud, and finally Height Fog. And then I'm just going to go down to Skylight and I'm just going to be turning on the real-time capture so that our shadows look a lot more realistic. Alright, perfect. So our car is looking pretty good and the whole scene is ready to be made now. So what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to be starting with creating the grass. Also, by the way, this was rendered inside of path tracing. You can render this in lit mode as well using Lumen. However, that's not going to give you that good results. I mean, obviously, path tracing, the quality of path tracing is obviously always going to be better, but the render times are going to be much higher as well, right? So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be starting with the grass. So for the grass, what I did was that I went to Add, Pixel Content, and then I can just wait for it to open. And so once you're inside the Bridge app, you can just simply go to collections, actually no, home, and then you can just go to 3D plants, and then let's search for grass. You can obviously add any sorts of plants if you want, but I'm just going to be adding a basic grass, and the one which I like the best is this Kikuyu grass. I think that's what it's called. Anyway, so you can just add either this one, or you can add wild grass or thrashing grass or something like that. You can thatching grass, that's what it's called. Yeah, you can just basically add any sort of grass which you want. I think this one looks the most realistic, so I'm just going to be adding that. Just download that. Medium quality should be fine. And actually, I would recommend you to not go above medium quality because we're going to be adding quite a lot of grass, and otherwise it's going to take a lot of processing power. So I'm just going to be adding that in my scene. Double click that, and so now you're going to see that we have this grass. So let me just minimize that. Now what I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to be going back to my foliage mode, and you're going to see that all the grass has already been imported. If that's not the case with you, I'm just going to show you what to do. So I'm just going to delete all that. So once you have this foliage mode open, if you don't see any foliage right there, you can just simply select the first one in the foliage and then shift select the last one so that you have all the meshes selected. Then you can just drag it inside this foliage type. And now you're going to see that all of our foliage is imported. You're going to select one, press Ctrl A and make sure that all of them are checked. And now you can just start to paint. So you're going to see that right now the grass is being painted and looks pretty good. If I just switch to path tracing, you can see that it's going to look a lot more realistic. So that's just something you have to keep in mind. Also, you can just try to sort of understand any problems that you may have. So right now the problem is that the grass is way too large. The size of the grass is way too large. So I'm just going to be selecting all of the grass. I'm going to go down to scale, and the scale I'm going to set it to something like 0.6. The minimum is 0.6 and the maximum 0.6. That's perfectly fine. And now we can just start to paint. You're going to see that it's going to look pretty good. But still, even now, I think it's a little too large. And some of it is intersecting with it. So how exactly do we take care of that? We simply select this erase tool. Make sure that your erase density is set to 0. And then you can just start to erase the ones which you don't want. So that's something which you can do, and that's pretty good, right? However, another thing which I'm going to do is that I'm going to Control Z all of that, Control Z, and then I'm going to be selecting all of it, and let me just set the max height to something like 0.4. I think that should be good. And yeah, I think that's pretty good. But right now, another problem which I'm facing right now is the fact that the density is pretty low. So I'm just going to be increasing the density with all of them selected. I'm just going to be increasing the density of this to something like 150. And I think now it should look pretty good. Yep, perfect. So before I start painting this, I'm going to go back to my selection mode and let's add a landscape material to this first. So I'm just going to go back to my bridge app, and here I can just go to home, surfaces, and then I can just search for maybe something like grass, or yeah, I think grass should be fine. So something like this, I think dry grass, because we sort of want that forest ground look, right? I think that should be good. Actually, I think I do have that already downloaded. Yeah, high quality, I think it's good. Let's add that, and let's select our landscape, go down to the landscape material, and let's drag this in like that. And you're going to see that it looks pretty realistic. The material is pretty high quality, and so I'm just going to be scaling it up slightly. So I'm just going to double click the material, and you're going to see that the material editor is going to open up. You can just click this tiling / offset button right here, and we can set the tiling to something like 0.6 and 0.6. I think that looks a lot better. Yep, I think that looks pretty good. And or maybe we can maybe make it even larger, something like 0.3 or 0.4. I think that should be good. Yeah, I think that looks a lot better. Perfect. Let me just close that out, press save all, and then I can just get rid of this, just close that, and now we can start to paint our grass. So for the grass, I'm just going to go back to my foliage mode, and then we can just start to paint grass. But before that, you know what, one other thing which I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to be setting up my camera first, so that I can only paint my grass inside the areas which are going to be visible in the camera. Because if you paint grass, if you add grass or any other asset outside of the camera view, which is not going to be visible in our scene, so that's basically just a waste of your time and resources, because obviously every extra thing you add in your scene is going to increase your time to render the scene by some time. So I'm just going to add cinematic cine camera actor. Let's right click that and pilot it. So now we can just place it wherever we want. Let me move my camera right there. You can move the camera using the same controls as your what do you call it, as your viewport. So I think something like that should be a good position. Let me look at this. Yeah, I think it was similar in this one. I did increase the height of this frame to make it a square frame. So you can simply do that by going up to your sensor width and sensor height. And if I just make them, both of them the same, you're going to see that it's going to become a square frame. However, in this scene, I'm not really going for that. So I'm just going to set it back to default. And another thing which you're going to be noticing is the fact that this whole scene is blur. So I'm just going to go down to the focus method, and I'm going to set the manual focus distance to this car. Just select your picker tool and then just select any part of the car, and I think it looks pretty good. However, the tires are not looking good and some parts of the car are looking pretty bad. So, and that is because our screen percentage is set very low. So if I just set that to something like 130, you can see that our scene is going to look a lot better. But for now, let me just set it back to 60% because so that just we can save some resources and have a high frame rate while we're editing. Obviously, when we're rendering it, we're going to increase the resolution. Let's see how it looks in path tracing. So obviously path tracing is going to look better. But yeah, right. So let's add grass. So I'm just going to go back to my foliage mode, and now we can finally start to paint the grass. So I'm just going to start from here. Let's paint some right there. And I'm only painting it till the edges of the camera so that we don't waste any resources. If obviously you're trying to make an animation and your camera is moving, then you can be sure to then you can feel free to sort of add your foliage wherever you want. So I'm just going to paint it till there. And also one thing which you might be noticing right now is the fact that the foliage which is at the back is not visible. So I'm just going to be showing you a way to fix that in just a bit. So yeah, I think that should be good. Now we can just select our erase tool. We can get actually not get out of our foliage mode. We can have that foliage mode on, and then we can just go to window, viewport, and let's turn on a second viewport. And I'm just going to be docking this right here in my outliner. Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to go up there, and I'm just going to be erasing all my foliage from underneath the car just so that we can save some assets, because when I was painting the foliage, I painted some underneath the car as well. So I'm just going to be getting rid of that. Make sure that you don't erase anything outside of it, because then that's going to be visible and it's going to look pretty bad. I think something like that should be good. And we are actually removing quite a lot of foliage. Actually, I did remove some from there as well, so I'm just going to paint that back in. Perfect, and I think our scene is looking pretty decent. Now let's fix that issue at the back, where our foliage is basically disappearing. And to fix that, I'm simply going to be entering a console command, and that's going to be foliage dot force LOD space 0. Now if I press enter, you're going to see that all the foliage is going to be appearing in perfectly high quality, and well, that is going to come with the performance cost as well, obviously. So I'm not going to turn that on for now. When we are rendering it, then we can just turn that on. I just wanted to show you how it looks. So to set it back to the default, you can just simply write foliage.force LOD and then -1, and that's just gonna set it back to the default. Press save all, Control S, and oops, my bad. Control S, and now we can move on to the next step, which is going to be adding the trees, because right now our foliage has been added, and I think it looks pretty good. The next step obviously is to add the trees. So for the trees, you can use the same collection which we imported in the last tutorial. You're going to see this one right here, black alder. So I'm just going to open that. I'm going to open the geometry folder of this. You can download this collection, by the way, from the Epic Game Store. It's I think it's called Megascans Trees Black Alder collection or something like that. But yeah, European Black Alder, I think that's what it's called. But yeah, you can go to the Pivot Painter folder inside it, and now you can just simply drag trees in. So I'm going to drag a really large tree in the front, something like that maybe. I think that should be good. Maybe scale it down a little bit, something like that, so that we have some of our leaves visible. And now we can use the second viewport to sort of place our tree where we want it to appear. I think something like that should be good. Maybe even move it down slightly and move it close to the car. I think that should be good. And now we can just continue to duplicate this tree and add more of them. Yeah, so what I'm going to do, also by the way, if your reflections are not looking that good in the glass especially, what you can do is you can set your scalability mode to cinematic. By default, I think it is set to epic, and you're going to see that in epic your reflections are going to look very fake. So you can just go to settings. This also, by the way, this is only this option is only available in Unreal Engine 5.1 and above. So if you have Unreal Engine 5.0, then this unfortunately is not going to work. So just be sure to upgrade your Unreal Engine first. So you can just go to settings, engine scalability settings, and then cinematic. Now you're going to see your reflections are going to look a lot better. Let's see how it all looks in path tracing. It looks amazing. Although we're not noticing that big of a difference. So let's just continue to see if both of them look similar, then we can maybe render it using lit mode. So I'm just going to be duplicating this tree by pressing Alt, holding Alt on my keyboard, and then we can just add one right there as well. And this one, I'm going to be moving it down, something like that, and moving it across. So we're basically trying to fill in the whole area, and sort of make it, yeah, basically we're trying to fill in the whole area, something like that. Let me move it apart. I think that should be good. Or maybe move it right there. I think that's looking pretty decent. Obviously the lighting is not that good, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be adding a post-process volume now. So I'm just going to go to add visual effects and then post-process volume. Let me just move it down. Then let's make it infinite extent, unbound, just turn that on. Then you can just go to exposure, and the exposure you can set the metering mode to manual, and then exposure compensation to something like 11 or maybe 10. I think 10.5 should be the sweet spot. I think that looks pretty good. And now you can just go ahead and move your sun to see where it looks good. And I think I'm just going to select my direction light. Let's move it closer to the car so that we can simply simply rotate the sun from this viewport. And now we can just select the rotate tool and start to rotate it. So I think something like that should be good. I think I'm going to go with that because I think that looks pretty decent. And one thing which you might be noticing right now is the fact that the background is looking pretty bad. And so to fix that, we're going to be adding fog. So how exactly do we add fog? You simply go to exponential height fog, go down, first turn on volumetric fog, and you're going to see instantly you're going to notice that it's going to add a lot of fog, which is going to look amazing. And we're going to increase the fog density to something like 0.05. And so that's just going to add a lot of fog in the back. And Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to be duplicating the trees and then just adding them, just scattering them around the place, all around the place, so that they sort of hide the background. I think something like that should be good. And that just sort of fills in the background with a lot of trees, which make the whole scene look pretty realistic. And they just cover up the background for us. I think that looks pretty good. Now we are going to have to fill in this space with some grass, because obviously it doesn't look good right now. It looks empty. So with all this selected, I'm just going to paint some grass back there. It's obviously not going to be visible right now because it's going to disappear. We are going to be adding that command later on to make it more, to make it look better. I think it looks pretty decent. Yep. So now we can just simply go ahead and maybe turn on that command. Let's hope Unreal Engine doesn't crash, because we have quite a lot of geometry in our scene. Press save all and Control S as well. And I think our scene is looking pretty decent. And we're almost done. We're almost good to go. And so I'm just going to go to path tracing mode. Let's see how it looks in that. I honestly think lit mode looks better for some reason. So I'm going to go with lit mode for this. But right now, the main difference you're going to see between these two is the fact that this has a lot more contrast and the scene looks a lot better in general. So I'm just going to make this look better as well. So actually, we can maybe move these trees back. What that's going to do is that that's going to sort of give them that silhouette look, which is going to add to the realism, and it's going to make the whole scene look better. Let me delete that. I think something like that should be good. And one thing which we can do is we can go down to our post-process volume. Let's go down to our global, and then we can just go to contrast, and then we can increase the contrast to something like 1.2, and I think that makes our whole scene look a lot better. And let's try going into path tracing mode. And you're going to see that the fog in the back looks a lot better, a lot more realistic with the path tracing mode. And you can even go to your post-process volume, go down to path tracing. It's right here, path tracing. And if you turn on reference atmosphere, you're going to see that it's going to come up with a whole new atmosphere. And the color of that right now is super blue. So that's why we have this bluish tint right here. But you can obviously change that using this sky atmosphere actor. You can go up to the ray. I'm not exactly sure what this is called, relay scattering, whatever. So you can just maybe reduce the vibrance of that. Yeah, so I think this looks a lot more realistic as compared to our lit mode. So yeah, you have all these options. You can just choose whichever one you want. I think I'm going to go with that because I think that looks a lot more realistic. Then we can maybe move these trees a little forward, something like that. Maybe a little back. Maybe we brought them too close. I think that's good. Yeah, I think that's the sweet spot. You can obviously reduce the exposure of this if you want. I'm just going to go ahead and turn on these lights. So let me make sure that snapping is turned on. Let's move it apart. Let's select the light object and let's apply the light material to these. So I'm just going to go to my automotive materials, exterior, and then lights, and let's apply the white light to this and to this as well. I think not that, my bad. I think it was this one. Yeah, right there. And now we can select the class, move it back in place. Oops. Yeah, and I think our scene is looking pretty decent. You can obviously play around with the post-processing a little bit. You can maybe add some bloom, or you can change the method of the bloom to convolution. That just, in my opinion, that makes it look a little more realistic because the bloom is only in selective areas, not the whole scene. So it makes your scene look a little more realistic. And apart from that, you can maybe tweak the exposure, but I think that's fine. Maybe add a little bit of chromatic aberration, so 0.2. That's just going to give your scene a slight bit of a realistic effect. You can add lens flares if you want. I'm not going to add them because then I think in this scene they're going to make it look a little too artificial. Apart from that, I think we're basically good to go. Yeah, we can turn on reference depth of field as well. This is just going to make our depth of field a little bit better in path tracing. Then set your screen percentage to 100%. So basically, once this orange bar has been completed, what you're going to do is you're simply going to click these three lines right here, click high resolution screenshot, and then just click capture, and you're going to see a path right here. So you can just click that path, and then you can open your render, and then you can just share it wherever you want. You can post it, you can post process it, and yeah, you can do whatever you want. Apart from that, I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I really hope you learned something new. And yeah, that's basically it for this one, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye. Right, so you're going to see that we have 9 renders and animation right here. The first one, I'm just going to play it. You're going to see that the first one is a very realistic studio animation of a Lamborghini, and I'm just going to let it play. You're going to see that it looks pretty realistic, and we have basically created a whole studio around this Lamborghini, a whole garage, and the textures and everything looks very realistic, and they're all done completely inside of Unreal Engine 5 using Lumen lighting setup, and obviously Megascan's assets, which are free to use with Unreal Engine 5. Yeah, so we're going to be animating the camera and doing everything inside of Unreal Engine 5. Anyway, so that's going to be the first animation. Let me just go ahead and close that out. The next render is going to be this hyper-realistic render of a McLaren inside a city, basically, yeah, inside a street. So you can see, again, this looks very realistic as well. We're going to be doing this completely inside of Unreal Engine 5. Anyway, so the third one is going to be this this render of a Lamborghini inside on a highway. You can see this looks pretty realistic as well. Moving on to the next render, you're going to see we have another Lamborghini, but this time I decided to do something a little different, and this time we are rendering it at night. And so with all of these renders, we have one or two main unique factors. So in this one, it seems to be the lighting, of course, it's night lighting. In this one, in the previous one, this was basically how to do overcast lighting, how to add mountains in the background. And yeah, in this one, we will learn how to do like direct sunlight lighting and how to use shadows and trees and stuff like that to make your scene look a lot more realistic. And yeah, so those are the renders. And another one, this is going to be another McLaren inside of a garage. So you're going to see this again looks very realistic. And in this one, we're going to be learning how to use windows to sort of light your whole scene. And basically this the lighting in this is directly from the sun. However, it's coming in from the window. So yeah, that requires a lot of different techniques, which we're going to be learning in this course. Next up, we have this forest render. We're going to be rendering this McLaren inside of a forest. I think it looks pretty realistic as well. And yeah, we're going to be adding foliage using Megascan's assets. We're going to be adding the trees, the background, and then we're going to be adding some fog. And everything is going to be done completely inside of Unreal Engine 5. Next up, we have this Lamborghini Urus inside of a studio. Again, this studio is made out of marble, and we're going to be learning how to do indoor lighting, how to use basically immersive materials to sort of make your scene look a lot more realistic and stuff like that, right? So yeah, that's going to be that. And again, once again, we're going to be doing a sunset render of this Porsche in a forest, in like a grass field or something like that, right? So yeah, next up, we have this animation. This is a pretty different animation. I wanted to include this because a lot of these other cars were just simply using models to create a simple scenery. However, in this one, this is pretty different. In this one, we basically created a whole forest, and then we imported a model of, I'm just gonna stop right there. Yeah, we basically imported a model of an old car, and then we textured it, and then we added foliage on top of that. So yeah, all of that makes it look very realistic. So yeah, that's basically all you're going to learn inside this course. This course is amazing for Unreal beginners if you want to take your Unreal Engine 5 rendering game to the next level. And yeah, that's basically it for this one, guys. I hope to see you in class. Thank you.